You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Now, as a universal approach, we can all agree there's a time and a place that's gone, which is where passwords were effective, and now we need to replace it with more strong authentication.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is Joe Carrigan from Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We've got interesting stories to share this week, and later in the show, my conversation with Eric Olden, CEO and co-founder of Strata Identity. We're talking about the current state of identity management. But first, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. Where would InfoSec professionals be without users making security mistakes? Working less than 60 hours per week, perhaps. Actually having a weekend every so often. We get it. User behavior can be a challenge. But users can also be an InfoSec professional's greatest asset once properly equipped. What do we mean by that? Well, stay with us, and in a few minutes, we'll hear from our sponsors at KnowBe4 on that very question. All right, Joe, before we jump into our stories here, we've got a little bit of follow-up.
Yes, we do, Dave. We have Michael who writes in with a letter. Do you want to read it?
Sure. He says, Dave and Joe, I have listened to the podcast from episode 1, and I am glad that you kept it going after season 1. Well, thank you, Michael.
Yep.
He says, with a house full of young people, 14 to 25, I play the podcast as we do life around the house with the hope that they will absorb tidbits of understanding. They might never listen to the full podcast. We also talk about scams at the dinner table from time to time. With that said, my kids and my wife, who claims that she is naive in this space, are getting the message. More and more, my family is grasping how bad the internet is.
It's really bad.
As they are now seeing advertisements on YouTube and other social networks that claim magical results from acne prevention to wealth creation. Before buying almost anything, they ask me, is this really true? And 99% of the time, it is not true.
Right.
An example is my 19-year-old son wanted a PlayStation at an amazing price. Of course, payment was only accepted via Zelle. He had no clue that all would be lost if he actually attempted to purchase it. While we're getting better at spotting spam and hack attempts in text and email, we're seeing more and more in social media. I encourage everyone to have a more critical eye. Love the show and the spinoff At the Movies. Michael. Well, thank you, Michael. It's very kind of you.
Yes. And your son is going to lose all of his money if he zells somebody the is that the verb zell? I don't like this.
Zell.
I don't like this this way that we have apps now as verbs. I'll Venmo you the money. I'll Zelle you the money. I'll PayPal you.
It probably started with Googling things.
Right.
Yeah.
We did it in the 80s. Remember partying?
That's
Party
right.
was a noun up until the 80s.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's party. You're probably right.
Yeah.
It's become so normal now, I don't even think about it.
Right.
My girl likes to party all the time. All right, let's jump into our stories here. I am going to kick things off with a story that I think is a bit of good news in an otherwise bad situation. This is an article from the folks over at Ars Technica written by Ashley Bellinger.
Okay.
And it's titled, Teens Can Proactively Block Their Nude Images from Instagram or OnlyFans. So this comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Familiar with them?
Yep, I am.
They've been around for decades.
Yes, they have.
And I guess they were, I'm pretty sure they're the folks who originally were responsible for putting kids' pictures on the sides of milk cartons.
Yes, I think so.
That sort of thing.
Yes.
But of course, they've expanded as times have changed and the internet has come. One of the things that they really help with is kids who are being exploited online. And a big part of that is sexual images, nudes, that sort of thing.
They maintain a very large list of hashes that match CSAM images.
Right. And so what they've pointed out in this article is that between 2019 and 2021, the number of sextortion cases that were reported to them on their tip line has more than doubled.
Really?
And they said nearly 80% of those cases involve teens suffering financial sextortion, which is pressure to send cash or gift cards with the threat of their images, their sexualized images, being spread around online.
Right.
Now, you can imagine you're a teenager, you've for whatever reason, you've done what you've done.
Right.
What's done is done.
Yes.
But somehow it's spread beyond the party that you had initially intended that image to go to.
It probably was never, there probably never was a party the way this, that initial party may not have been who they said they were.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Right. So once that image gets out there, it's awfully tough to get it back.
It is.
And one of the problems that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has is that with their tip line, they gather information on that line. So in order to use that, you have to share some things. And you can understand why someone who found themselves in this situation
doesn't want to share the information.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So they have recently launched a tool. It's called Take It Down. It had a soft launch in December. And they said about 200 people have used it so far to block uploads or remove images of minors shared online.
Really?
And how this works is it's an anonymous system where you feed the forgive me, I'm going to say the offending image. That's not what I mean, but the offending image into the system, and that image gets hashed, and then the hash is what gets spread around, rather than the actual image.
Right. This is very similar to what they do with the database that they keep. They don't actually keep a database of CSAM, just a list of the hashes for those images.
Right. And just real quick, Joe, can you give us a little rundown on what exactly a hash is?
Well, actually, I can give you a rundown on what a hash is, but there's also another thing here. But it suffice to say, a hash is an encryption algorithm.
Yeah.
That is a one-way algorithm. So the benefits of a good cryptographic, or the features rather of a good cryptographic hash, are that if you change the input, you'll get a completely different output. If you know the output, you can't regenerate the input. And it's very hard to take two inputs and come up with the same output.
I see.
Now, that's true for cryptographically sound hashes. But I think what the Center for Missing and Exploited Children uses is MD5, which is actually pretty easy to generate collisions. And you'll hear cryptographers say MD5 is useless, but it isn't useless because it has a really interesting feature that is not good for cryptography in that it's fast, but is remarkably good for forensics because you can quickly go through all these files, get their MD5 hashes, find out if any of them match, and then go look at the file that matches.
I see.
And see if you have an offending image.
Right.
So that's the idea of what a hash is. And you don't want to use something other than MD5 to do that. You want to be able to do this quickly and then go investigate the matches.
So it's that old thing of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And MD5 is perfect for forensics. Now, there is another tool out there called, I think it's called PhotoDNA. It's from Microsoft. That is more than just hashing an image, because one of the things about MD5 is if I change one pixel in that image, the hash will be completely different.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But with PhotoDNA, that is not the case.
Okay.
I get something very similar to a hash. It's not actually a hash. Well, I guess you could say it's a hash, but it's a non-reversible representation of that photo that if I start changing little bits of that photo, it'll still come out to something very close to what, or maybe the same as what the PhotoDNA signature is.
Huh. Okay.
So they might be using PhotoDNA.
Well, so this technology has been adopted by some big players here. Meta is using it for Facebook and Instagram, so hard to get much bigger than that.
Nope.
There's an online networking app called Yubo that's using it. But then also, interestingly, Pornhub and OnlyFans are both participating in this as well.
Yeah. Well, these guys are, it's interesting that usually companies that make their money with porn are some of the biggest advocates of the Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Right.
And because their business model, they have to walk a very tight legal line.
Yeah.
And they want nothing to do with anything illegal.
Right.
And however you feel about it, they're going to do whatever they can do to keep that stuff off their platform because they don't want their business model shut down.
Yeah, and I guess it helps their argument for being in business. If they can demonstrate their participation in
look at us,
like
we're good corporate citizens.
Right, we're doing this in good faith.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? They may be doing it in good faith. I'm not judging their motives, but
right.
I'm happy with the outcome.
Yeah. So, interesting article here. We'll have a link to this in the show notes. Again, the tool is called Take It Down, and I think it's worth checking out. But maybe it's something to have a conversation if you've got teen kids in your life. Yeah. Something that they might want to know about. Spread the word to their friends.
I think the key thing to tell them is that this is now a means of extortion. This is the way people are going after and monetizing the malicious activity on the internet right now.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Joe. And this article points out that there have actually been some extreme cases where this sort of thing has led to suicide.
Yep, absolutely.
Which is the most tragic thing you can imagine.
No one doing that.
And so I think your point is excellent that to have this conversation to say, there's always hope.
Right.
Right? And there are tools like this available that can help with this sort of thing. Nobody has to know who you are. So there's always hope.
Yeah, that's an important thing that there are tools out there that can resolve this issue. You shouldn't be I've said here before, and maybe I'm being too much of an old man here, but don't share nudes with people or people you just are online. Just don't do it. It's bad practice.
Right.
And here's why it's a bad practice. But in the event that you do, you're right. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. This will not be something that dogs you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You will be one of a great many people who have had this happen to them.
Right.
It's unfortunate that a great many people have it happen to them. But don't let the shame drive you to do something terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, again, we will have a link to that story in the show notes. Joe, that's what I have for us this week. What do you got for us?
Dave, my story this week comes from David Olive, who sits on the Preparedness Leadership Council. I go to meetings with them sometimes. And Dave sent me this. It is a LinkedIn post by Gary Warner, who's kind of a big deal in the computer forensics industry.
Okay.
And the LinkedIn post starts off with the question, why do we have so much fraud? Right? Why do we have all this fraud? And the answer is because the fraudsters are getting away with it. And Gary links to a couple of articles. The first one he points to is a post from the House of Lords in England.
Okay.
Where there is an organization within that government body that's called it's got some act in front of it, but essentially it's the Digital Fraud Committee.
Okay.
That's the last three words of the committee, Digital Fraud Committee. And one of the things that this committee noted is that in the UK, 46% of crime is fraud, but 1% of law enforcement is dedicated to fraud, which is interesting.
Okay.
And Nikki Ann Morgan, who is the chair of this committee, says, and I'm going to quote her here, fraud is the most commonly experienced crime in the country. A person is more likely to be a victim of fraud than any other crime, and it costs billions in losses. Yet it is under-resourced, under-prioritized, and the impact is widely underestimated. There is another article that Gary links to from a news outlet called Which, and this article that's WHICH,
right,
not burner. Every time I hear Which, I just go right to Monty Python.
Well, and I'll say over on the Cyberwire, from time to time, we reference articles that come from Which, and it just. I feel like I'm in an Abbott and Costello routine when I'm saying, today Which reported that who? No, not who, Which. Anyway, go on.
Which is in England.
Yeah, go on.
The author is Josh Wilson, and he noted that the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, the NFIB, received around 900,000 fraud reports for cybercrime in 2020 to 2021. But of these, just 8%, or 72,000 about, were disseminated to law enforcement for investigation. Then, in 2021, just 4,500, just under 4,500 fraud cases made it to court. So I did some rough back of the envelope math, Dave. And if that 900,000 number is for 2 years, and 1 year they put in less than 4,500, that means you have a 99% chance of getting away with fraud in the UK if your case is reported, which it probably won't be.
Okay.
Remember that Ms. Morgan said that it is widely underestimated, and I think it's widely underestimated because it's widely unreported.
Yeah.
Underreported.
Now, how much of this do you suppose is that there's fraud and then there's fraud? In other words, there's what I would describe as nuisance fraud, where
right.
somebody, I'm out $5.
Yep.
Oh, darn it. And I'm not expecting the police to bring out a SWAT team in a hard target search to get my $5
That's an excellent question. That is an excellent question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. The articles don't seem to break that down to that level.
Right.
But they do break down what is interesting is police resourcing.
Uh-huh.
And the City of London, which I believe is actually different from London larger. It's a small section of London.
Okay.
Of what you would think of as London, has a police officer staff of 1,357 people, and the fraud desk, the fraud department, is 34 of those people, 2.5%. And that is the most in the United Kingdom, or actually, I think this is only England and Wales.
Okay.
So it's not all of the United Kingdom. But the average is around 0.6%. So, like, for example, the Metropolitan Police, I don't know who that, maybe that's for larger London, but it seems like a pretty big police force at 43,000 people.
Yeah.
I don't know how big of an area they cover, but they only have 300 fraud officers. 0.7% of their police are investigate fraud, dedicated to preventing fraud or investigating fraud. So when you have this kind of disparity in crime and reporting, first off, there's arguments to be made that there's a problem here.
Okay.
Right? Like 46% of the crime is fraud, but that fraud, no one dies during that fraud.
I was just going to ask
no
about
one gets
that.
beat up.
Right. It's not a violent crime.
It's not a violent crime.
And the violent crime makes the TV news.
Right.
And so when the folks who are in charge of funding these places stand up to be reelected,
yep.
What are they going to say? I'm going to cut down on fraud.
Right.
Maybe, but mostly we're going to make your neighborhood safer.
Right.
That resonates.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would bet this is focused almost entirely on England and Wales. I would bet that if we did an investigation or somebody did some reporting on this in the United States, we'd find something very similar here.
Yeah.
And for very similar reasons, I think.
Yeah.
And we talk about how devastating it is to be physically assaulted. Mm-hmm. I have a friend of a friend who had that happen to him and still hasn't fully recovered from it.
Sure.
And the issue is, well, what about the people who have lost $100,000?
Mm-hmm.
What about the old lady that loses her entire life savings? She is never going to recover from that either.
Right.
That is a financial end, the financial end of the road, or at least a significant change in the road for that person.
Yeah.
These are devastating crimes. You're right. When somebody scams you out of $5, nobody should come looking for that. But maybe there should be a cap. If someone scams you out of more than 10 grand,
mm-hmm.
or I guess it's pounds here, right? 10,000 pounds.
Right.
That these things will be investigated, at least to some level.
And there may be. I don't know what the threshold is for example,
right.
If you call your local FBI office, which they encourage you to do.
Or they encourage you to make a complaint with the Internet Crime Complaint Center.
Right.
Which you may never hear back from.
Right.
But they use it for keeping statistics.
Right.
And maybe for doing data analytics.
What is the threshold at which you will get a callback from your local field office?
It's an excellent question. I don't know.
I'll have to ask that question. Let's see if I can get an answer to that.
To the next FBI person.
I know some folks in the FBI. Yeah.
That's good.
I'll do a little homework for myself there.
Maybe we should have one of them on as a guest.
We could probably swing that. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, interesting stuff here, and I guess this is one of those stories that leaves me thinking.
Right.
More as many questions as answers.
Yeah, it's and that's probably good. That's probably good that we're thinking that like that. It's a real. It makes you scratch your head. I don't want to say the story is a real head scratcher. The problem is a real head scratcher.
Right.
Right. Why do we dedicate 1% of our police resources to 46% of our crime?
Yeah, I mean, that's a policy decision, but part of it, I'd be interested to hear what, as we're saying, what someone in law enforcement would say about this. Why, Is it that they choose to dial it in this way? Is that their constituents demand that they dial it in this way? It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will have a link to that story in the show notes, of course. We would love to hear from you. If there's something you'd like us to consider for the show, you can email us. It's hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. Joe, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from Sean, who writes, I'm an avid listener of many CyberWire podcasts, which is great.
Yeah, good.
We'd love to hear that. As a security leader with a background in social sciences, I particularly enjoy Hacking Humans, CSO Perspectives, and Eighth Layer Insights. That's Perry Carpenter's podcast. And CSO Perspectives is Rick Howard's, right?
Yep.
I learned something new and noteworthy from every show, and I am frequently able to put them immediately into practice in my professional and personal lives. So many thanks to the entire CyberWire team. I received the attached message from, quote, Meta Resources recruiter informing me of an open CISO lead role.
Okay.
So, and it's what's interesting is that it begins with his name.
Yeah, but also that, I mean, a CISO, like, this is swinging for the fences.
Right.
Right?
Batting for six, as they say.
Right. If you're trying to scam a CISO, which is a top-level cybersecurity professional, right? Like, okay. Well, here's the email. It says, Dear Sean, hi, we are MRG, a recruitment agency based in U.S. We have an upcoming opening for Chief Information Security Officer lead role with one of the well-renowned bank in the world, based in the USA. While going through your LinkedIn profile, we thought you might be interested. Please go through the attached JD and revert back to us with confirmation about the interest for the role. Also, kindly send us your updated resume, maximum of 3 pages, and information below to start process for your application. What is your current residency city and country? Are you authorized to work for any employer or on a contract in your current residency? As this is a contract role, would you be able to commence this contract on C2C? How many years of experience do you have leading IT security systems? Brief us about your experience of end-to-end assessments and remediation projects resulting from company M&A activities. Are you proficient in developing physical and digital security protocols and procedures? When can you be available to join if selected? Please provide your best callback number. What is your desired compensation? Do you provide us right to represent you to our client? Meta Resources Group is a professional service provider firm that has been offering expertise in IT consulting, staffing, and recruitment and offshore IT services based on the latest market and technological trends. Combining the years of experience and knowledge of certified staff, innovative mindsets, and implementation of upgraded technologies, Meta Resources Group has been the partner of all business genres with an exceptional capacity in leading technologies for enterprises. Our client is a division of world's second-largest pharmaceutical company who are about to expand business in 17 new markets worldwide, having over 150 open positions in diverse roles to fill in.
I thought it was a bank. Did he say bank to start with?
I think he did. You may find more about us at this website. Best regards, recruitment team, Meta Resources Group.
So this came as an email attachment that Sean sent along, and it actually has the PDF for the job description, and the title of the job description is Chief Information Security Officer Lead / Project Manager. I don't know who wrote that, but it's just like word salad, right? If you're the Chief Information Security Officer, you're not a lead, you're a chief. You're actually part of the C-suite, right?
Right.
You're an officer in that company.
Right.
And that has certain, depending on what kind of company you have, that has certain obligations that go along with it.
Yes.
You're probably also not a project manager. Project managers work for you.
Right.
Right? Especially at large organizations like banks. This doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
If somebody sent me, this is why I don't work with third-party recruiters anymore, Dave, because so many things I get from them look exactly like this.
Right. Right. Yeah. All right. Well, our thanks to Sean for sending that in to us. Again, we would love to hear from you. Our email is hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. we're talking about making users into an asset for security professionals. Simply put, users want to do the right thing. They're often just lacking the knowledge to do so. That's one of the reasons KnowBe4 has released Security Coach, a real-time security coaching tool that takes alerts from your existing security stack and sends immediate coaching to users who've taken risky actions. For example, imagine a user has visited a high-risk website or tried to open a document containing malware. Existing security tools will likely block that action, but the user might not understand why. Security Coach analyzes these alerts and provides users with relevant security tips via email or Slack, coaching them on why the action they just took was risky. Help users learn from their mistakes and strengthen your organization's security culture with Security Coach. Learn more about Security Coach at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Eric Olden. He is CEO and co-founder of Strata Identity, and we're talking about the current state of identity management. Here's my conversation with Eric Olden.
From a historical standpoint, I individually have been in identity since my first company, Securant Technologies. I co-founded that in 1995, and that company was started at the early days of the web. And what was going on in those early days was that there was a shift to having people on the internet access your website and buy things from you or get information and so forth. And the big challenge at that point was that many organizations had never had millions or thousands even of users accessing their data and their applications. And so a need arose for how do you manage the way that people access applications and data and do that at scale. So the first generation of identity management really came up in that era to solve the problem of doing security at scale. Then as the market and technology evolved in the early 2000s, we started to see more and more of the complexity come in. And that meant that instead of just having a single idea of how a user gets into an application or a website where one size fits all, there was a whole lot more complexity introduced because companies needed to be more specific and granular about who can access what. And that meant that identity management started to become more sophisticated as well. And that evolved beyond things like single sign-on to include authentication and access control and authorization and auditing. So in that first generation, we really saw scale and then complexity come in. And then if you go a little bit further into the future, around 2006, I started my second company called Simplified, and we were helping companies deal with the move to software as a service, where now the applications were run by a third party. And that meant that you needed to find a way to have standards that could span different organizations. And I was part of the group that co-authored a standard called SAML, or Security Assertion Markup Language. And what that was really doing was created a new notion called identity federation. And what we were doing with that was making trust work across the internet between organizations. And you saw a rise in how users would access SaaS applications. And that second wave was really interesting because it coincided with a lot more this confidence that organizations would have that data needs to reside outside of their firewall. outside of the perimeter. Then if you scale it to fast forward to kind of modern times where the cloud becomes the main idea of where you're going to run your computing. And a lot of this was accelerated with COVID in the pandemic, where everybody had to work remote. And so all of a sudden, all of your applications and all of your data and all of your users were now anywhere on the internet. And that led to a shift of identity becoming the perimeter, and notions of zero trust came out and became popular. And where we find ourselves today is, how do you secure the users and applications when everybody can be anywhere and your applications and your data are everywhere? And that is the multi-cloud problem. And what we've seen as a way to how to move into that and solve that problem is to apply the concept of orchestration to identity. And orchestration is very common in technology. It started in IT automation and server management and things of that type, things like Kubernetes and Terraform, but it hadn't yet been introduced to the identity plane. And that's really where the innovation is happening today, which is, how do you automate and integrate security for your users and your apps and your data in this really distributed multi-cloud world? So it's been a long history, but it's been an exciting one to be part of.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, from someone who has your perspective and your history with this, what are some of the problems that you consider to be solved when it comes to identity? And what are some of the challenges that we still face?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the most profound one is that the root of so many problems is passwords. Passwords are the weakest link in security, in my view. And the reason for that is that it's so easy to use social engineering and phishing to steal somebody's, basically trick them into providing their password. And then a bad actor can take that password and steal data and do bad things. And so we've known about this forever. And there have been various efforts to replace passwords with various things along the way. And multi-factor authentication, passwordless being the most popular, and tokens before that. The ironic thing is that we know what the problem is, we know how to solve it, but up until really recently, there hasn't been the organizational will to get rid of passwords and move to passwordless. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing now a combination of factors accelerating that trend, including legislation from the federal government requiring alternatives to passwords to be used, but also with the private industry and insurance, where if you want a cyber insurance policy, if you don't have a multi-factor authentication or a passwordless strategy implemented, then you may not get your policy underwritten. So we're seeing these factors drive adoption, which has been really good, because now, as a universal approach, we can all agree there's a time and a place that's gone, which is where passwords were effective. And now we need to replace it with more strong authentication. So I think that was probably the biggest one. And then the other related to that is that virtually everybody today has a very powerful authentication mechanism in their mobile phone. And most phones have the ability to apply biometrics, which mean that they can scan your face or your fingerprint and basically take something that you are, your facial proportions or your fingerprint, and then link that physical identity to your digital identity. So this is really, I think, making that move to how you can be able to have secure access without using passwords. Just use your phone. And so that's exciting, but we're really early on in the implementation. So everyone's got the phone. Now we need to solve the problem by making that work with the applications. And there's a lot of integration work to go into that. And we think that the appropriate way to do that is to not require custom integration, but to instead use your technology to do that. So that's kind of where I see the state of identity security at the moment.
Can you describe for us how you imagine something like that working? I mean, I think for a lot of us, myself included, who uses lots of different passwords every day, but also enjoys using things like Face ID, like Touch ID, and can kind of see a future based around those sorts of technologies. What does the future look like in terms of folks going about their everyday business and being authenticated for the things they need to use to do that business?
Well, the great thing is that it's so much more convenient for people to use their biometrics on their phone than it is to remember all of these various passwords. So I think that's been a really nice thing, is that the security gets better and you have ease of use. So I think that's maybe the magic that is of the moment, is that historically security used to mean a lot more work. And now you actually get rid of work because you don't have to remember your fingerprint. You have it on you at all times. So I think that's going to be good news for people, myself, yourself, and everyone else. I think on the other side is, if you're an enterprise or government agency, how do you bridge the technology with your environment, with your applications? And that's really driving a lot of digital transformations today, are looking to use modernization of their infrastructure to solve this security problem while they upgrade their systems to be more cloud-based. So there's this idea that instead of lifting and shifting your application workloads from your enterprise into the cloud, oftentimes that translates to moving your mess. Instead, we see an opportunity to move and improve so that you adopt the cloud, but at the same time, you modernize your identity technology so you can use these new biometrics and passwordless technologies to secure your applications. So it's basically taking advantage of the fact that you have to move things to modernize them, and to use this as an opportunity to upgrade and do that in a measured way so that it doesn't get to be a huge challenge in terms of upgrading your systems.
Are there any established or proposed standards for this, so that we could perhaps see things that work across platform and across devices and across destinations on the internet? Is that ultimately something we aspire to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think standards are the backbone of the internet, and we wouldn't have the internet as we know it without agreeing on core standards. And so if you look at the standards that underpin the transformations that I'm referring to, there's a couple that really stand out. I think the first one is SAML, which is how you can rely on different organizations to securely authenticate their users and interact in a trusted way. The next generation of federation is OpenID Connect, or also known as OIDC. And that is a really powerful way to avoid having passwords at all, because through OIDC, for instance, you can use your Google Gmail authentication over at an e-commerce store and buy something. So you don't have to have a password at the store, because you can use your identity at Google through this OIDC standard to authenticate you at the store. On the authentication side, there is a really interesting standard called FIDO, F-I-D-O. And what FIDO stands for, basically what FIDO does is makes the authentication mechanism itself open so that no one vendor controls how the authentication process works. And so you have FIDO and now FIDO 2, which is the next version of it, allowing you to mix and match different authentication technologies without rewriting your applications. So that's been a really big and powerful capability. And you can see it in this new technology that's coming out called passkeys, which are really very compelling because they avoid passwords and they're supported by the major platform vendors like Apple and Microsoft and Google. And what that allows you to do is basically to use your identity in these other platforms in a similar way as OIDC, but to use this in a more ubiquitous way. And you can link that with a device. So passkeys and FIDO are really interesting. And then the last one, I think, is one that I'm personally very involved with, which is the Identity Query Language, or IDQL. And what IDQL was designed to do is to make the rules and the policies in all of the different cloud platforms on an east and west basis. So imagine Amazon and Google and Azure making your rules consistent across all of these different clouds and also through the computing stack. So you can have a consistent way to define and manage policy at your application, your data, and your networking layer. So IDQL is really the kind of cornerstone of policy orchestration. So think about it as a universal language to define the rules no matter where the application and data is. And that allows organizations to do this in a much more do governance and say how they're going to allow people to access apps and data in a consistent way. And so there's a open source project that we helped get off the ground called Hexa, Hexa, and it's now part of the CNCF, which is an open source body that a lot of people know for Kubernetes and OpenTelemetry. So the standards, they're all coming together from SAML, OpenID Connect to FIDO and passkeys and now IDQL. And that's really how to think about standards and identity in this complex distributed world.
Joe, what do you think?
Really interesting. The identity thing is, I think of it as how do you prove that somebody is who they say they are?
Right.
And how do you do that at scale?
Right.
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 Which is a real problem.
Yeah.
The identity management, initially we were just talking about doing the AAA, the authorization, the authentication first, authorization second, auditing all the while.
Right.
And there's some people use a different A for auditing, and I can't remember what it is, but It essentially is the same thing. It's just creating an audit trail. And then the question becomes, what do you do when you start relying on other people to attest to someone's identity?
Right.
Right. And we do that with the Google Authenticator or Google Authentication accounts. Are there any accounts that you use? You just log in, you say, use my Google identity?
I used to go down that path, but after years ago being burned by Facebook, I'm not falling for that again.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I'm not falling for that trick again.
No.
So many great jokes end with that punchline.
Just upload my entire address book? Well, sure.
That's another one.
That'll be so convenient to me to connect with my friends. Why not?
I one time had somebody interview me for a job that was looking for somebody that was to develop apps to go out and do just that.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not working for you.
Good for you.
In fact, after this interview, I'm going to go take a shower. That's gross.
Okay.
There was no infrastructure like this 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was, everybody had their own username and password. You really didn't know who they were. And now this SAML language has stepped in to help you share this authentication over these different areas. But you're right. How do we trust that?
Yeah.
How do we trust that with using like Facebook? I wouldn't trust Facebook to do anything.
Right.
I don't even trust Facebook to run Facebook or Meta
Right.
to run their social apps, whatever they are.
Yeah.
I use them as little as possible. But then the interesting thing happens with COVID where everybody has to go home and work from there. And now your users can be coming from anywhere. And when I heard this, I honestly thought for a second, this is something we all should have seen coming, right? As an industry, we should have seen that we're going to need to have this kind of capability. We're going to be having, the perimeters of organizations were dissolving. All COVID did was just really speed that up.
Yeah.
Make it happen within a couple of weeks.
Right.
Which is probably a little too fast.
Yeah.
But now everything is everywhere, and including our authentication. And one of the words that Eric uses, or one of the phrases, I love this term, we live in a multi-cloud world.
Mm-hmm.
That is an interesting way to think about it, and that's exactly right. There are all these different services running everywhere, and I'm going to come back to this idea of cloud in a minute. But when you ask him what the problems are, he says that the root of most of the problem still comes down to passwords.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because as humans, we suck at making passwords. We just can't do it.
Yeah.
But we had a guest a couple of weeks ago who said if you use a password manager, you're a lot less likely to be a victim of fraud because you're going to have the passwords that are different for every site and complex. But if nobody does that, or if users don't do that, or if companies don't enforce it, then it's not going to be successful. It's not going to be the case.
Right.
So another point that Eric makes is we still lack the organizational will to move away from passwords.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sticking with passwords and we're sticking with doing them poorly. That's not a tenable solution.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, there's efforts, you
Right.
know, and I feel as though the edges are chipping away at the username password combination. But you're right, it is slow going.
Yes. The phone is a pretty good tool. Eric says it's not 100% ready yet. I believe that. I think it does have the capability because it does have other ways to authenticate yourself, like with biometrics, like the Apple Face ID, which is remarkably good.
Yeah.
I like FIDO, which Eric also mentions. And I think that's a great way to go. But I want to get back to the cloud topic, and I want to ask this question, and maybe have a discussion with you about this. Am I a Luddite for saying that I don't trust the cloud? I don't trust cloud things.
In what way? How do you?
I have a coffee mug that my daughter gave me.
Okay.
My daughter also works in this field.
Yeah.
And it says on the coffee mug, there is no cloud. It's just someone else's computer.
Sure.
Right?
That old chestnut.
Yep. And
it's
absolutely correct. And that you don't know what happens when you put your data in the cloud. I was talking with another friend of mine who's been doing cybersecurity since before we called it cybersecurity. And he was talking about what he does and how he is remarkably against doing cloud data, of just putting data in the cloud. You have to make sure that when that data goes to that cloud provider, it's encrypted so that when that cloud provider gets breached at the location of whatever place they're getting breached at, and you don't know where it is. You have no idea where the data center is. You just know you have a service on the internet that you can access.
right.
In fact, that's why it's called the cloud, is because on those old diagrams, the internet was just a big cloud.
Right.
We don't know what's up there.
Right.
We don't know where it is. We just go to the internet and get it.
Yeah.
So I'm taking us down that rat hole that you hate when I go down, but I don't trust the cloud, Dave.
Well, I'll come at it from the other direction, which I think there's a good case to be made that when you're using the cloud instead of using your own on-site, as they say, on-prem
Right.
Resources, your own servers. It used to be that we joke that IT folks like to be able to go into the server room and hug their servers.
Yes.
They liked having them nearby.
I've hugged a couple servers in my day.
And so I think part of the notion is that the cloud providers are going to have more resources at their disposal to help with security.
Yep.
Because they're running at such a larger scale, presumably, than you are.
Right.
So
I get
there's
that.
going to be security baked in.
Yep.
And so that just becomes part of your risk proposition, that there are some things you're going to have to worry about, other things you probably won't. And if on balance, the cloud makes it a better proposition for you, not to mention it's probably going to be cheaper.
It is probably going to be cheaper.
Then there you go.
You're 100% right about the cheaper and easier, and particularly for like smaller companies. I get the use case there.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about larger companies and like maybe even government organizations, I think there's a lot of pitfalls that you open yourself up to if you just blindly start subscribing to cloud services and setting them up. I think that but of course there's all kinds of different things you have to do, and there's story after story of how people have deliberately configured things to be less secure than they are, and that's like a user issue, right?
Right. I also think that if you're one of those big-time users who's going to be operating on the cloud at a large scale, then you're going to have things in place to ensure that all those things are being taken care of, that
Right.
things are being encrypted, that they're being distributed, that they're, backup, all that stuff. You're going to be asking those questions before you sign that check that has a lot of zeros in it.
Right. So am I a Luddite or not? I
No,
don't think I'm
you're not a Luddite. You just have a healthy dose of paranoia and skepticism.
I think I have more than a healthy dose.
All right. Well, our thanks once again to Eric Olden for joining us. Again, he is the CEO and co-founder of Strata Identity, and we do appreciate him taking the time for us today. We want to thank all of you for listening, and of course, we want to thank our sponsors at KnowBe4. They are experts in helping users do the right thing through new school security awareness training. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Our thanks to Harbor Labs and the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at harborlabs.com and isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.